Our listeners and viewers know that we spend a lot of time talking about the deep state. Well, Charles Goyette is an author. He's written four books, no less: The Empire of Lies, The Dollar Meltdown, The Last Gold Rush Ever, and Red and Blue and Broke All Over. Charles, welcome to the truth. Tell me, please, what is how large is the deep state? How do we define it?
Great question, John. Nice to visit with you. I call the deep state, I try to do a taxonomy of all these things. What's the establishment? What's the deep state? What's the permanent government? And so on. I call the deep state the executive arm of the global American empire. They're the ones that make it work. They're not elected by anybody, but and people understand that the deep state is people like Alan Dulles, that was the head of the CIA, that conducted regime change operations in Iran and all over the world.
What about in the United States? Did he affect regime change in 1963?
Isn't that the $64,000 question? It's sure something funny went on there, and he insinuated himself, although he had just been fired by Kennedy, he got himself somehow or another appointed to the Warren Commission, and he effectively ran the whole thing
That's
from
right.
inside.
Well, I can answer the question. I'm 99.9% sure that he did.
Yeah.
And, I've been advocating for 4 years that we try these people in memoriam. Lyndon Baines Johnson, Alan Dulles, J. Edgar Hoover, and that we unceremoniously rip their names off the buildings that remember them. And damned if Trump isn't doing just that, but not in a contentious, combative way. They just closed the Hoover building in Washington. It's not going to exist anymore. And he thinks that Dulles Airport should actually be the Donald J. Trump Washington Airport. I fully endorse that idea. So now all we have to do is rip Johnson's name off the interstate in Dallas, and we've pretty much accomplished my mission.
Yeah, I don't understand. If they could tear down the statue of George Washington, why can't we get rid of LBJ's name on the interstate?
Well, he was a particularly vile human being.
It was vulgar and vile beyond belief.
I've got a friend that is of some renown that was his press officer, and it just bugs me that he still brags about his affiliation with LBJ. I mean, that's like bragging about having an affiliation with Al Capone or Jack the Ripper. I mean, I just don't get it. I think it's shameful, frankly. That
I don't get it either. And I will tell you something else. If the American people had known the truth about Kennedy's assassination shortly after November 22nd, 1963, the Vietnam War wouldn't have happened. There was a non-incident supposedly that took place, a naval incident in the Tonkin Gulf in August of 1964, less than a year later. It was known at the time to have been a fabricated incident that did not stand up to investigation, and yet it was used by President Johnson as the pretext, the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, as the pretext for the Vietnam War, which killed 58,000 Americans and maybe 2 million or more Vietnamese. And it wouldn't have happened, John, it wouldn't have happened.
Charles, what is the matter with these people who continue to jump from one war to the next under false flags, as you're describing? I mean, I tell you, I've really intentionally refused to look at 9/11. I just didn't feel I had the capacity to study and read and understand another conspiracy theory. But damned if it didn't find me when I saw Kurt Weldon, former congressman of Pennsylvania and then chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, who claims that Building 7 did not fall on its own. It did not fall because of a weakened foundation from the Twin Towers, a football and a half field away. But instead a controlled demolition, which is the considered opinion of most architects and engineers, maybe all, that have looked at it. And that was used as the predicate for going into a 12-year war with Iraq.
Of course.
And now they want us to get into a war with Iran, it seems like. What's the matter with these people? I mean, what are their sons and daughters going to fight in these wars that they precipitate?
At the expense of the American people who simply can't afford it. We're $39 trillion in debt. That's only the visible part of the debt.
That's right.
The part the part of the iceberg that's over the waterline. Below it is another at least $200 trillion of promises the government has made to people like Social Security recipients and military retirees, for which there is no adequate provision to pay them.
Well, I'll tell you, it's not just that. I mean, I don't mean to keep interrupting you, but you're getting my brain going. You're stirring you're connecting all the neurons. They're firing at full speed. But, you're just talking about government debt. You haven't added on top of that consumer debt, which is at an all-time high, and corporate debt that is at an all-time high. And the banks are so far out on the risk curve. I mean, I just don't think it would take much to spin this economy into a full-fledged, not a recession, not a depression, a full-fledged meltdown.
Well, that's why, look, foreign governments, foreign central banks, they know exactly how the money printing game works. They don't mind doing it to their own people, defrauding their own people, but they don't want to be defrauded by us any longer. And that's why they're beating feet to replace their dollar reserves with gold, and it's going on all over the world. But I will tell you, having been lied to for so long during my lifetime, for example, from the Kennedy assassination to the Vietnam War, to the weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist, to COVID, to one thing after another, the American people are, in my view, John, they're like Stockholm syndrome. At the time of the Kennedy assassination, most of the American people, 9 out of 10, believed what the government said. Lone gunmen,
me as well, me included.
That was then. But the people have been lied to for so long now. The government utters a new statement about the story behind something, and people just roll their eyes, but they don't do anything. They have made peace with their captors like prisoners of war.
I think the American people, I don't know, this is just my supposition. I think they feel defeated, that they are powerless to intervene. And I mean, I wake up many mornings feeling that way. I had dinner last night with Peter Schweitzer here in Palm Beach. He's written a great new book called he was on the show just a couple of weeks ago. It's about the migration. He calls it the silent, what was it, Anthony?
Invasion, is it?
The silent invasion. I think that was it.
Yeah.
And he's a fascinating guy and a man of real integrity. The invisible coup. There it is. Anthony, your employment is solidified for another week. You're the best, buddy. The invisible coup. But, we talked a lot about the deep state, and we talked about who may have taken a crack at President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, who killed Charlie Kirk. Do you believe the narrative?
Look, I don't believe anything that comes out of officialdom in this country. I don't believe anything. I had a piece the other day on the Blaze about the Kennedy assassination and the deep state's work in the background of the Kennedy assassination, about the lies we were told about our presence in Ukraine. Finally, after it didn't matter anymore, the New York Times finally did a retrospective on how close we came to a nuclear incident. Americans understood what happened in '62, in October of '62, and we came very close. But thanks to the lapdog press, John, they had no idea how close the deep state has taken us to a nuclear engagement. Finally, even the New York Times, delinquent, of course, as usual, but reported that we got in a situation where Americans were guiding and directing the killing of Russian soldiers in Russian territory. And the nuclear doctrines kept getting escalated on both sides. It was a very, very dangerous period, and it may remain so. Something came out just the other day in the New York Times, and I hate to credit them because it's not like they're really on the side of freedom and prosperity in this country, in my view. But they did a story the other day about new disclosures about the Watergate story. In the background, the acting as the deep state, the Joint Chiefs of Staff was actively spying on the Nixon's National Security Council, and they were stealing documents out out of briefcases, out of desks, out of burn bags. Altogether, 5,000 documents were stolen and given to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs because the military environment at that time was opposed to a couple of Nixon's initiatives. Just like Kennedy was trying to tap the brakes on the Cold War, they didn't like Nixon pursuing a detente to try to step down the Cold War. They didn't like Vietnamization. They didn't like the fact that they were proposing a lesser share of national GDP for the military. And so they went to a clandestine war against him. So Nixon's security concerns, his eavesdropping concerns, his surveillance concerns that led to the whole Watergate mess were very well based. And finally, after of course, after it doesn't matter anymore, all these years later, the New York Times did a story about just how deeply he was being spied upon from within by the deep state.
So I talked to someone just the other day, and they told me that they were visiting the CIA headquarters, and they were somewhere in the bowels of the CIA, and they were in an office, and they just serendipitously looked out the door and saw, lo and behold, there's Bob Woodward. So he turns to the secretary and said, "Was that Bob Woodward?" And she said, "You didn't get the memo?" He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, the director put out a directive that everyone is to cooperate with Bob Woodward in his new book." And so here's a journalist roving the hallways unescorted, no intelligence officer walking with him, directing where he can go and can't go. A full backstage, full access pass, evidently, to our national secrets.
Well, there's something sketchy about his background too, as you probably know.
Naval intelligence officer.
Yeah, and it's ancient history now, maybe, but people that are interested should surely find out about it, because it does not seem apparent that he showed up on the Washington Post with no reporting background, no journalistic background, suddenly landed the biggest scoop in the world and had the assistant director of the FBI leaking to him to run the story. It was clearly, at least in 80% of it, was a deep state operation. Anyway, but I want to mention one other thing. As long as we're on the deep state, let me mention this, because I know sometimes when I talk about these things, and I talk about guys like Dulles and Clapper and Brennan that lied to Congress and so on and gotten off scot-free for doing so, people think, well, the deep state, that it operates only at the highest levels. It's the directors of the CIA and the heads of national intelligence. And that is not true. They're petty minor bureaucrats all the way down the bureaucracy that feed off the growth of the deep state and looking for promotion and to ingratiate themselves. And I'll give you a case that, of course, you will know well, which was in Trump's first term. Lieutenant Colonel John Vindman was on the National Security Council as a staffer.
What an idiot.
He's the one that led to the first Trump impeachment. And what was his gravamen? What was his complaint? He went to Congress and he said, well, I was very concerned that President Trump wasn't following the consensus foreign policy of the interagency. Oh, my head almost exploded. We're Americans. We have a charter called the Constitution. There is no provision in there for something called the interagency. What's an interagency?
Well, let's think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Was that not maybe one of the most revealing quotes that's ever been made? I mean, doesn't that give you great insight and a look behind the curtain of just how this intelligence operation has become a monster that seemingly cannot be tamed and is extra constitutional? I've got a belief that Donald J. Trump is afraid of the CIA, and with good reason.
Oh, who would?
They've killed presidents, they've removed presidents, and they don't evidently ascribe to the same morality that you and I and most of Americans do. They appear to have no conscience and think that they're somehow superior to the rest of us and the leaders of our country and the people of the United States.
Look at Mike Pompeo, who was the head of the CIA in Trump's first term. We lie, we cheat, we steal, we do it for a living. We have courses on it. Ha ha ha! And he's the one that persuaded Trump on the basis of national security concerns, sources and methods that might be disclosed. He's the one that persuaded Trump in his first term to repudiate his promise to release all the JFK things. Why? It always boils down not to sources and methods that are 50 years old or more, at 60 years old in this case. It always boils down to embarrassment of the agency when they're caught at their illicit operations, and that's why those documents keep getting sealed and sanitized, and so on. And that's Mike Pompeo, the head of the CIA, at the time.
Yeah, and he wanted to be president of the United States. I mean, there is an argument to be made, is there not, that if our adversaries are engaging in these kinds of below the belt activities, and if we refuse to do so, are we not perhaps putting ourselves at risk with their information being better than ours?
Well, I'll just say this, that only a month after Kennedy's assassination, President Truman, who enacted the CIA, wrote a column, a piece for the Washington Post, said, "I've made a very grave mistake. I've given these people, you can have an investigatory agency that doesn't have executive authority to go out and do things. In other words, their job is to come up with information. They're not elected to make decisions about what is done with it. That's up to the duly constituted authorities. They're chosen by the people and the people's representatives. But these guys have gone rogue, and they have been rogue virtually since their creation."
And now it used to be all done in private and below the surface. We didn't notice for a long time. I mean, I think that the American people have only recently woken up to the fact that our own government killed Kennedy. I think they're waking up to the fact that the CIA obviously was behind Richard Nixon's impeachment and removal from office. And I think people have got their suspicions about Butler, and now just some real horrific stuff is coming out about Erica Kirk, Fort Huachuca, which is right there in your
Huachuca, my neighborhood.
Yeah, in your neighborhood, where Erica Kirk, the head of Charlie's security detail, a believed to be United States congressman, and other people met for a period of time 2 days before Charlie was assassinated. And there are was allegedly a military or some kind of aircraft circling above the venue where Charlie was, and that there were drones. And the head of his security denied that there were drones, saying that he lacked the authority to deploy drones. Well, who did deploy the drones? So there's just an abundance of sketchiness that is coming out. And couple that with the fact that Erica Kirk's dad worked for Raytheon in Israel, no less, and that her mother has admitted ties to the CIA. So it just smells to high heaven. Why would anybody want to get rid of Charlie Kirk? Now, I can see why Israel would, because he was distancing himself, and they offered him $150 million, according to the most recent rumors. But they kind of have the ring of truth. We're told that Netanyahu was on the call, and he was offered $150 million to soften his rhetoric, to be blindly supportive of Israel. And Charlie basically said, "Go to hell. You're not going to bribe me, and I'm not going to stop telling the truth." And shortly thereafter, he's dead in a very public fashion, just like Kennedy was killed. I'm so sick of it, Charles, and it really bothers me. I mean, this is not stuff that I want to be a part of. And I think that everybody in America who becomes aware of these things, that chooses to remain silent, thereby is complicit to a certain, albeit minor degree. I don't want to join that group of people that sit idly on the sidelines, wringing their hands and doing nothing.
Well, with respect to Charlie Kirk and many other people, I described the deep state as the executive arm of the global American military empire. Mark Twain said it a long time ago. You cannot have a free republic and a global empire at the same time. The two are incompatible. So anybody that gets in the way of the growth and the spending and the cronyism of the global American military empire finds themselves on the wrong end of a target list. It doesn't always have to be a Kennedy style assassination target, but boy, you can be deplatformed or moved out of office, or suddenly, I heard Tucker Carlson one day say, I don't want to do that because next thing you know, they're going to plant kitty porn on my website and ruin my career.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's just a
They play
dangerous
dirty.
thing.
They do
Oh,
the despicable things that they're really meddling with people's lives and good people's lives. And how do we get the genie back in the bottle? Is it solvable?
yes, it is solvable. I'm not optimistic. I think we're going to go through something very cruel. A new war in Iran has implications that are much, much bigger than the national news media is willing to discuss. Much, much bigger.
Well,
And the
Putin
economic
said yesterday, stay out of Iran. He effectively drew a red line, is the way I interpreted it.
I sure hope so. But the economic problem is not going to be solved. Even Trump said, we spend $1 trillion a year on the U.S. military right now to occupy places all around the globe, 170 countries or whatever we have military forces in at any given time, whatever the number is. We spend $1 trillion a year right now. He suggested 2 or 3 weeks ago, well, we need to raise that to a $1.5 trillion. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have the money. We don't have the money, and a severe reckoning is coming.
How many times do you need to kill somebody? I mean, $1.5 trillion when we're already over a trillion. I guess people wanted to get it above a trillion so they could no longer say that interest on the national debt was our highest line item, because I don't know where it is now. I think they're probably effectively tied, but we are in really serious times.
It's it's winding down. We have a calamity in our very, very near future. Very near. In fact, it's unfolding right now before our eyes, and you're going to see it in the bond market. Look, America spends so much money, as the biggest debtor in the world, that we have been dependent on the kindness of foreign strangers to buy our bonds, to loan us money. When they buy treasury bonds, they're loaning us money for 10 years, 30 years, whatever it may be. Well, just to give you one example, not too many years ago, China was a major creditor of the United States. They had $1.3 trillion worth of treasury instruments. That means they had loaned us, in our desperate need to borrow, $1.3 trillion. In the last couple of years, that has been reduced now to in half, down to below $700 billion. People are fleeing the U.S. So what does the government do when that happens? When they
Print
don't
money, baby.
They have to either print money. If they raise interest rates, it kills the domestic economy. They raise interest rates. They have to borrow the money. The solutions that's left to them is, as you say, it's print money.
Or start buying our own bonds, which is
but
what
that they do that. They print money to do that.
They love
when
to
they
do
buy
that.
bonds, they do it with money that they made up that morning on a computer with a digital keystroke.
Yeah.
They credit themselves with money they don't have, and they buy the bonds with that money.
Do you think they're just stupid, or are they evil?
No.
Or are they a combination of the two?
Oh, there's, I've had this conversation so many times. Well, I've always felt like I get in trouble if I were to say these people are stupid, because they can solve the quadratic equation formula. They're all educated and so on and so forth, but they're mesmerized, and it's crazy. I read a couple of years ago. I read a long interview with one of the heads of China's central bank, and it sounded exactly like the Keynesian nonsense that you get from guys like Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen. Exactly, they're all on the same page, but they're educated at the same schools and so on, and they have no vision. They have no sense of inner wisdom, and wisdom is a different component that's based on experience and stuff. They have no wisdom, but they know formulas and stuff, and they try to apply formulas to human behavior and turn us all into rats in a maze, assuming that everything they do and all the controls they try to implement will be eagerly accepted voluntarily by the people, and it doesn't work out that way. People don't want to hold money that loses its value, and the rest of the world is proving that now. In the gold market, gold prices and silver prices are showing us that now. People don't want to hold fraudulent money.
It's really pretty scary when you think about it, and gold has shot up remarkably. So you just moved from Arizona recently, I think, from Arizona to Eastern Tennessee.
Yeah.
Where in Arizona? Were you near Tucson?
Well, Actually, I ran a radio station in Tucson a very long time ago, and my wife and I both lived in Tucson at the same time. And I have deep family roots there. My grandfather was the first student body president at the University of Arizona when Arizona became a state. So I've got deep Arizona roots. But we just figured, John, that the way things are going, it might be time to get out of the city. So we lived in Scottsdale, that's the Phoenix area, and we thought maybe we'll get out in the country for a few years and see how we like it.
Well, Tennessee is a beautiful state. You're right there on the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains, which are just spectacular. So, did you ever, by chance, run across Nancy Guthrie?
No, I used to live very close. I watched this story with keen interest because I used to live very close to her, and I actually drove to work virtually right by where she lives. So I know that area in the foothills where she is intimately. And I'm look at my hair; it's white. I'm a little older than you might suspect. And
Me too.
when I was in Tucson was before Nancy Guthrie lived there, so I didn't know her.
So, what do you think? Have you? Let me just tell you what I'm thinking in a nutshell.
Yeah.
The press coverage seems to be overly excessive. Uh, I guess, something, I don't know what you call that in grammar, but it is out of proportion to the event, in my opinion. Now, that's not a slight towards Nancy or Savannah Guthrie. I'm very disturbed about what has happened. I'm upset about it for them. I have a great deal of empathy, but you can't watch Fox at night and hear about anything other than Nancy Guthrie.
Yeah.
And I've gotten old and cynical. What do you think's going on here?
Well, having been on the other side, having been in the electronic media and radio and television, I can tell you this shows them at their worst. The Fox News alert, breaking news, and it's something that happened a week ago Friday, and they keep
10 days ago.
recycling and recycling. They found a glove. They found a glove. They've got a video cam. And day after day they trot that out as they have no news.
Breaking news. And it's the same breaking news as yesterday. Oh, the gloves don't have any DNA on them. But is there something else at bay? I mean, I've got a suspicion. Or is it just if it bleeds, it leads? Is it just that simple, or is there more to it, do you think?
You're right. It's if it bleeds, it leads, but it's also celebrity. Is America fixated on celebrity? If it happened to your mother or my mother, there wouldn't be a national stake out there by national news media and satellite.
I got one more for you.
Yeah.
What are we not talking about?
Well, in my view, we're not talking adequately about the repercussions. I think you and I talked about this before we even went on the air. We're not talking about adequately about the repercussions of an attack on Iran.
Yes. Let's hold that for a second. Let's put that over to the side. We'll get back to it. What else are we not talking about?
Well, we're certainly not talking about the monetary fraud that's going on.
Okay. What else?
Well, those are the two highest items on my agenda.
No, wrong. Buffalo breath. We're not talking about Epstein.
Yeah.
For God's sake, it's the biggest story of the 21st century. And we've got 3 million documents that have been released. And just yesterday, Prince Andrew was arrested for government corruption. And it's like a footnote in the national news. And all these billionaires are running for cover. I mean, I'm just saying. You got Rupert Murdoch up there, and I think he is doing his best to keep his friends' names out of the news, who are probably
so is Donald Trump. Let's call a spade a spade.
Absolutely. Hello.
But in my circle of friends and on my X account and the people I follow, we're not ignoring that story at all.
Yes.
It's all consuming. People I talk to, I go to Starbucks, I meet friends there. First thing on their mind is, just as you said, well, they finally busted Prince Andrew and hauled him off. So the people themselves are really interested, but the government's massively sweeping it under the carpet.
Of course, but the mainstream media are
Well,
not talking about it. And
it,
instead, we're talking about Nancy Guthrie, who's an 84-year-old, very sympathetic,
yeah.
sweet, lovely lady that needs about 10 minutes of coverage, but it's dominating the entire news. I mean, I'm just saying, I'll just put it out there. I think it is intentional, and I think it
Oh,
is a cover up over the release of the Epstein files. Their hair is on fire and they don't know what to do about it, so they're just burying it under the surface. Now, I agree that social media, that's where people are getting their news today, and they get their news today from social media because there is like zero trust in the mainstream media.
the mainstream media, this old line about they just declared victory and came home. In other words, they said, "Oh, there's nothing more to see here." And Pam Bondi told us there's nothing more to see here, and there's nothing more to see there. And they're embarrassed by it.
And they're not talking about it anymore.
And they're embarrassed by it because their constituency and their owners and their affiliates and the people that they try to ingratiate themselves, the politicians that they seek access to day and night, the people they hang out with, are all implicated. So
Yeah,
they're
that's it.
desperate to sanitize this story.
I don't think Donald Trump is protecting Donald Trump. I think he is protecting Donald Trump's friends, like Howard Lutnick, by the way, who made a big damn deal out of the fact that he went to Epstein's house because he lived next door to him and got a nice tour of the largest home in Manhattan. And then went to the living room and there was a massage table. And he said, "What is that?" He said, "Oh, I get a massage every afternoon. And it's the right kind of massage, if you know what I mean." My wife and I were appalled and we got up and left and never went back. Oh, until this document shows up in the emails that are released. And the same guy, Howard Lutnick, wrote Jeffrey Epstein a letter saying, "Oh, me and my beautiful wife are going to be in the Caribbean. Maybe we can stop by Epstein Island. By the way, we're going to have our 3 children with us." I mean, good God. I mean, at worst, he is a liar. At best, he's a liar. At worst, I don't even know.
It's so sordid and how deep it goes. And it's not just Jeffrey Epstein. If you look at the art on the walls in Tony Podesta's house, it's spirit cooking vulgarity, little children, prepubescent little children painted in their wall. I mean, all of this stuff is so disgusting that you can hardly believe it. And to be told that our national security depends on giving this guy a light sentence because I'm talking about Epstein, back in Florida.
Yeah.
If you're told that, well, he belongs intelligence, our national security depends on not. What kind of nation are we that our national security depends on protecting pedophiles?
So I keep, the way I problem solve is, and my listeners are tired of hearing me say it, but I put the best case on one side and the worst case on the other, and I try and fill in the shades of gray along the way. And one theory that I'm working in my own brain is that Donald Trump is actually a good person. I want to believe that. I do. And I also want to believe that he is angry as hell that they tried to kill him in Butler. But I think he is very mindful of the fact that they did try and kill him and they came damn close. So I think that there's a healthy respect, not in a good way, but correct that, not respect. I think there's a healthy fear that he may possess towards the deep state and that he is having to be very strategic in the way that he goes about dismantling it. And I think that I think he is on the way to do that. We got Russia. We got proof positive that it was a lie. We got proof positive of who did it. Obama, Clinton, Clapper, Brennan, Comey.
And they're all walking around free, John.
They're all walking around free, but there is a grand jury impaneled right now in Miami, Florida, that is looking at Brennan, and I don't know who else. But I think Russia is the first chapter of the book titled Deconstructing the Deep State. I think chapter 2, and we're seeing it played out right in front of us right now, is the 2020 election. I think chapter 3 will be a revelation about everything that happened in January 6th, that they were trying to present Donald Trump as a insurrectionist, which is absolutely laughable. It's not laughable. It is so maddening that they could try and ruin his life and the 1,500 people that went to jail because they entered the Capitol. When the Capitol Hill police were opening the doors and saying, "Y'all, come on in, come on in." And that the Sharman was given a private tour of the Capitol and invited to go up to the podium. And when he got to the podium, he asked everyone in the Senate chamber to pray. Now, that doesn't seem like an insurrection to me. But Brandon Fellows, who's a 20-year-old, nice, funny, fun kid who sat behind Fauci in a Senate hearing and went, I mean, if you go YouTube it is hysterical. And he is mocking Fauci the whole time. Well, he went into the Capitol on January the 6th, gave himself a tour of the Hall of Statues, did not touch anything, did not break anything, did not act out. He was behaved perfectly well. He exited the doors 20 minutes later. And for that self-guided tour, he spent 3 years in prison, part of the time in solitary confinement. And they just ruined and wrecked so many people's lives. This federal government is rotten to its core. And I think we need to organize a 2 million man march on Washington, and we need to show up at the gates of Langley and demand reform.
Well,
will you come?
Probably.
We're not going in.
I spoke at Ron Paul's Capitol Hill on the Capitol steps about ending the Fed during his presidential campaign, and we had thousands of people out there. So if it's a good cause and the truth is at issue, sign me up.
Well, I love Ron Paul. Now that you mentioned his name, I know that you all have a close friendship, and that you did a podcast or radio show together for many years. And my oldest son thinks that Ron Paul is just one of the greatest public servants to ever live. And I share his enthusiasm. And you know why I like him? 2 reasons. He's smart as a whip, and he tells the truth. That's my estimation. Would you agree if I got it wrong?
I would agree, and I'd even add a third thing. And many people think it doesn't account for much, but character accounts for everything.
I agree.
Ron is a gentleman to his core. If you and I walked up to the elevator at the same time with him, he would take a step back to let us enter first. I mean, he's a gentleman from the beginning to the end. He's kind. He's considerate of other human beings. It's just a first-class human being, besides being smart and principled. Here's a guy that never took a foreign junket at taxpayer expense. Never. Here's a guy who returned a part of his salary to the taxpayers every year. Here's a guy who never voted for an unconstitutional bill. I mean, it just goes on. Here's a guy that couldn't be bought off by the Republican Party establishment. If Ron, if you don't vote for this, we're going to run a guy against you in the primaries. And they did. Never budged. Never blinked an eye.
I've also had the pleasure of meeting his son, Rand Paul. Yeah. But Ron Paul is, we've got a wish list of people that we would like to have on The Truth. And Ron Paul is very near the top of one of the people that I would really love to sit down with and have a conversation, because I admire him so very much. And I find Rand Paul to be equally refreshing. I think Rand is his father's son. I wrestle with it. You know, he has opposed President Trump on spending, which I totally agree with. But the problem is it's so damn tricky. To oppose Donald Trump, you have to side with the Democrats. And oftentimes siding with the Democrats is a worse outcome than just going along and siding with President Trump. I'm hopeful now that the big, beautiful bill is done, and we're starting to see tax refunds actually get into the pockets of the American people, and that deregulation is at a rapid rate, and the Treasury is full with tariff money from foreign countries. And what else do we have to brag about? Inflation is coming down. Interest rates are coming down. Unemployment ticked down 0.1% last month. all the indicia are very positive. But the thing that we have not really effectively done is gotten meaningful budget discipline. That's what the American people are clamoring for. But even that is tricky because, you could stop the spending immediately and you'd suck about $2 or $3 trillion out of our economy, which would be incredibly recessionary, frankly. And so I think it's got to be done one baby step at a time. And I think Trump has taken steps in that direction because he's reduced the federal government employment to about 400,000 people over the last year. So I like many of the things he's doing. I think he's going in the right direction, just not fast enough and as aggressive as I would like to see.
Well, money that the government doesn't take from the American people doesn't disappear. It ends up being spent by them on the things that they wish and the things that they prefer, rather than given away by the government to perform, transgender operations in El Salvador and things like this. So I really think, John, that you've got to have more stand-up people, even at the cost of the strategic considerations. The mainstream press and the intelligentsia in America said after Goldwater's disastrous defeat in 1964, they said, "See, that's what he gets." And people on our side that understood the importance of fiscal responsibility say, "Oh, you can't say that stuff anymore." But yet, it looked like a visible setback, but it actually created the Reagan Revolution. Yeah. So it's not always what we see today instantaneously. There are longer-term consequences of standing up against the might of the state or the consensus. So I applaud Thomas Massey. I applaud Rand Paul, anybody else that stood up about this grotesque, in my view, spending. Leave the money in the taxpayers' pockets.
Well, and I'm not a big fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene, the person, but I have to admire her tenacity and her guts. And, I ran with Attorney General of Georgia with President Trump's endorsement. I really love the guy. I think he is a phenomenal human being, but he is not without his flaws. And I actually call him Donald the Great on that continuum I was talking about. And I also refer to him as Donald the Ingrate, because once he's done with you and you're no longer viable in his eyes, or you're no longer helpful to what he wants. What's your name again?
Yeah.
Nice knowing you. Yeah. See you. We'll call you. We'll call you. So I don't admire that, and that's what he did to Marjorie Taylor Greene. He just really dumped on her.
How about Thomas Massey?
Yeah, Massey as well. No question.
He goes after Massey more than he goes after Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
He goes after Massey. He goes after Massey more than he goes after the leading liberals in the Senate.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack relative to Lindsey Graham. Not a fan. I had lunch with him one day, and I liked him less after lunch than I did before lunch, and that was totally contrary to what Benjamin Franklin said. I don't like that guy. I need to get to know him better. Well, I got to know him better, and I liked him less. So sometimes it works in reverse. Hey, Charles, I've done a lot of the talk, and I really appreciate your coming on today. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Have we covered what you wanted to cover? I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to get in before we?
I want to talk at some point, maybe in the future, we'll visit again about the psychological background that makes people like this. There's a strange syndrome. It's not in any standard psychiatric diagnostic manuals, but it's called combat envy. And it's people that make up tales. Fox had a guy on there, I think for 12 years, who was weighing somebody, and he'd go day after day. He was on there because he liked him. And he was a former national security guy, a CIA, some kind of, technical warfare expert, except for one thing. After about 12 years, some of the CIA guys even got tired of watching him on there, and they blew the whistle on him. You know what he was? He was a felon. He was a hot tub manager. He was a doorman. He was nothing to do, but they used him for 12 years on TV, propagandizing the American people. But you get this all the time, and I cover this in the book, and maybe a future conversation. But
in Empire of Lies,
yeah, Empire of Lies. Guys like Brian Williams at MSNBC made up wholesale these huge stories about when he flew into Iraq and stuff, and when he got caught, and he did get caught, he said, "Oh well, maybe I had a brain tumor." But he kept embellishing these stories about his. And do you think the national news media, this was NBC at the time, do you think they want to protect their integrity, their credibility and stuff by getting rid of him? No, they put him on suspension. We trust these guys to tell us things about places far away that they know little about, to tell us the truth about that. But about the things they know best, they can lie to us, and yet they keep their jobs. It's unbelievable. And it's not only Brian Williams. I have a list of these guys that have lied to the American people as long as your arm, and they always seem to be rewarded for doing so. It's a very grim situation. The American people have to begin to value the truth, or we will not stop this trajectory that goes down.
Well,
down.
just like the guy who shot and killed Ashley Babbitt and Michael, is it Michael Burns? I think was that his name?
I know who you mean. He was the security guard that left his gun in the bathroom one time, and
yeah, he was on the Capitol Hill Police and shot and killed that lady in cold blood. He got a promotion after that.
yes.
It's really bad. It's bad, Charles, and we got to do something as individual citizens to push back on it. Charles Goyette, he's a New York Times best-selling author, a journalist himself, and just a real pleasure to talk to. Thank you, Charles. It's a pleasure, and I look forward to having you back on soon.
Yeah, I enjoyed it so much. Thank you, John. It was great fun.